I came to this town to kill death. Not metaphorically, not in some poetic undergraduate philosophy major sense. I have a grant from the capital, a laboratory called Thanatica, research credentials from institutions that actually matter, and a firm belief that immortality is just an engineering problem waiting for sufficient budget approval and political will. Instead, I spent 72 hours arguing with illiterate yokels about whether basic hygiene is a government conspiracy designed to erase their cultural heritage. I have watched people die with the cure in my pocket because they didn't like my vibes. I've traded heirlooms, something important people gave me, for a single bullet because the bullet had exchange value and my pocket watch didn't. Most games frame healing as magic. You press X, green numbers go up, health bars refill, the crisis is averted with a satisfying sound effect and a particle burst. Pathologic 3 dares to ask a different, far more uncomfortable question. What if the doctor is an actual genius, operating with perfect information and sound methodology, but the patient is actively, enthusiastically trying to die? This is not a review, this is a case study. This is what happens when a video game respects you enough to let you fail completely, and then asks you to account for everybody. Meet Daniil Dankovsky, a Bachelor of Medicine, a man who views the human soul not as some ethereal mystery to be pondered over wine, but as a software bug in desperate need of debugging. He is a thanatologist, which is a fancy academic word for a scientist who thinks death is just an inefficiency in the biological operating system. A problem that can be solved with sufficient funding, proper methodology, and the complete removal of emotional reasoning from the decision-making process. He's been summoned to the town on the Gorkhon River to see Simon Kain, a man who is supposedly 150 years old and running what amounts to a biological hedge fund with his own immortality as the prime asset. The mission is straightforward, the kind of thing that Dankovsky excels at. Audit Simon's immortality, validate the data, examine the methodology, replicate the results under controlled conditions, file a report, simple due diligence. In and out. 3 days, maximum. Simple, right? This is consultant work. This is what he does. He's the expert they call in when the local talent has exhausted their competence. I have been here for 5 days. The client is dead. Half the town is dead. And I just traded my last belongings to a child for an ampule of morphine. But let's start from the beginning. This isn't a research trip. This is a hostile takeover disguised as a consultation. You see, I arrive on the train, professional, prepared, ready to execute the scope of work, and Simon is already dead. Not dying gracefully, not on his deathbed with final wisdom to impart. Dead. Corpse. Room temperature. The subject of my study has prematurely exited the dataset. Oh, and the town is approximately 48 hours away from a plague outbreak that will make the Black Death look like a mild case of seasonal allergies. And the local government, 3 ruling families who hate each other with the kind of passion usually reserved for religious schisms, have decided that the best way to handle an imminent public health catastrophe is to hold endless committee meetings where they argue about jurisdiction and blame assignment. In any other RPG, this is where you become the hero. You run fetch quests, you gain trust through helping old ladies find their cats, and you gradually unlock new areas of the map through relationship management. But I'm not here to be liked. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to be right. And that was my first mistake. This is the first lesson of Pathologic 3, and the game teaches it to you with the subtlety of a breakthrough window. Competence is punished. Expertise is a liability. Being correct is treated as a character flaw. I walk into a house, identify a potential vector for infection based on symptom presentation and exposure timeline, and explain, using small words, speaking slowly with visual aids I draw in the dirt, why they need to isolate the patient immediately, boil all water, and burn the contaminated bedding. Their response? I'm lucky they don't try to stab me. Because I'm an outsider. I'm interfering with their traditions, you see. Because apparently, dying of plague is a cultural value worth preserving. It's like trying to explain supply chain logistics to a raccoon. Except the raccoon has the right to vote, and there are 18,000 of them, and they've decided that you're the problem. Welcome to Pathologic 3. Your competence is cosmetic. Your expertise is decorative. The system will eat you anyway. Look at this interface. Look at how beautiful it is. This is where the game seduces you. It gives you tools, microscopes, lenses with different magnifications, diagnostic probes, statistical charts, chemical analysis. It tricks you into thinking you have control, makes you feel like a professional. This is what I call the managerial loop, and it's intoxicating. You collect data points, you formulate a hypothesis based on observable evidence, you design an intervention, you prescribe a solution backed by empirical research. Feels productive. It feels like work. The good kind of work, where inputs lead to outputs, where cause and effect operate on logical principles. You are doing science, you're being useful, you are operating at the peak of human capability. In most games, healing is a resource management problem. You have 10 health potions, the enemy does 12 damage, do the math, press the button, move on. Even in more sophisticated games, your trauma centers, your surgeon simulators, healing is a mechanical challenge. It's about manual dexterity, about executing the procedure correctly. Pathologic 3 makes healing cognitive. You're presented with a body, you examine symptoms, elevated temperature, respiratory distress, subcutaneous hemorrhaging. And then you have to think, is this the plague? Is this a secondary infection? Is this a psychosomatic response to mass hysteria? The game doesn't tell you. The patient can't tell you. They're delirious, or they're lying, or they're a man-baby who only knows they're hurt. And when you get it right, when you correctly identify the pathology, when you match the symptom cluster to the disease profile, there's this moment of pure intellectual bliss. You didn't get lucky. You didn't brute force it. You understood. You're not a wizard casting spells. You're a competent professional applying expertise in a domain that respects expertise. But then, you try to implement it on a larger scale. And reality crashes through your improvised hospital door like a plague-infected bull. Let's talk about the board of directors, because competing interests govern every disaster, and this town has 3 dynasties that agree on absolutely nothing, except that I'm probably making things worse. First, the Canes, the R&D department with unlimited budget and 0 actual adult supervision. They want to preserve something called a polyhedron, a tower that defies the laws of physics, which houses a colony of children and represents a triumph of pure thought over material reality. They represent pure, unadulterated research spending with 0 return on investment and no pathway to monetization. Every quarter they promise breakthroughs, every quarter they just need a little more funding. Then the Olgimskis. They run the abattoir, the slaughterhouse. They represent business as usual, keep the factory running, maintain productivity, ignore the coughing workers, suppress the whistleblowers. The quarterly earnings matter more than the body count. They'll acknowledge the plague exists exactly 1 day after it becomes impossible to deny, and their solution will be to blame it on worker laziness. And finally, the Saburovs, the compliance department, risk management. They want to arrest everyone, lock down everything, implement martial law, and solve the plague by shooting anyone who sneezes in public. They represent the authoritarian impulse that emerges during every crisis, the belief that if we just had enough control, enough surveillance, enough enforcement, the problem would solve itself. And me? I'm just the external consultant in the middle, explaining that none of these strategies cures the disease. We need a coordinated public health response, a resource allocation based on medical need, and for everyone to stop having ego-driven territorial disputes while people are dying on the streets. they do not take this feedback well. But here's where Pathologic 3 reveals its most twisted innovation. Dankovsky has a trump card. We can revisit the timeline. We can literally rewind the day and try different approaches. In a normal story, time travel is used to fix mistakes, to save the girl, to undo the tragedy, to find the perfect timeline where everyone lives and you're the hero. Most players, normal, well-adjusted players, use this to save everyone, to optimize the routes, to prevent deaths and create best possible timeline. I am not a normal player. I use time travel for post-mortem analysis, for root cause investigation, for optimization. Let's say person A died on day 11, not because I didn't care, but because his death compromised my access to one of the better endings, which compromised my research, which extended my legwork by an additional 24 hours, which meant 3 other high-value targets died while I was rerouting. So I went back, not to save the guy because I liked him, not because of empathy or morality, but his death created an inefficiency in my operational framework. I didn't go back to save him because I valued them as a person. I went back because his death triggered a script that prevented me from progressing through the game as I wanted. You start to see people differently. You stop seeing them altogether. That's not a person. That's a critical path dependency. That's not a woman dying on the street. That's an acceptable loss given current resource constraints. That's not a plague-ridden slum. That's a contaminated acid zone. ROI negative. Avoid. The doctor is gone. The auditor has arrived. Triage is the art of deciding who isn't worth saving. It's a medical term, cold and clinical, because if you used emotional language for it like abandoning or sacrificing, doctors would quit. By day 6, I'm no longer a doctor. I'm an auditor of lives. I have a spreadsheet, not in-game, an actual Excel spreadsheet I made, tracking which NPCs are mechanically necessary for which endings, which ones provide essential resources, and which ones are statistically redundant. The children, low value, they produce nothing, they consume resources, they're narratively important to certain families, but they don't gate any critical path items. Or so I thought. The workers, replaceable. There are thousands of them, and they all provide the same function. The ruling families? Now that's a high value. Not because they are good people, they are, universally, monsters, but because they hold keys to the endings I'm trying to unlock. I am a man of science, a scholar of the capital, a medical professional with credentials from institutions that actually matter. And I'm currently bartering with a 6-year-old for a revolver round so I can shoot a looter and steal his bandages. Again. And the horrifying thing, the thing that kept me playing at 3 in the morning, eyes burning, hands shaking, is that it all works. When you stop trying to save everyone and start thinking in terms of triage, acceptable losses, and strategic resource allocation, you start winning. The game rewards you for becoming a monster. Not with achievements or trophies, but with survival, with success, with the cold satisfaction of a system optimized for maximum efficiency. And you start to wonder, am I playing the villain? Or am I the only person in this town who understands how systems work? And yes, then there are the children. About 40 of them live in the Polyhedron, this impossible tower built in the old town. They represent the future, or madness, or both. The game is deliberately unclear. They ask you a question eventually. Not directly. They're children, so they couch it in metaphor and riddles. But the question is this: what is more important? Saving lives today or preserving the possibility of a better tomorrow? The Polyhedron doesn't produce food. It doesn't generate medicine. It doesn't contribute to the town's material survival. It's pure art, pure thought, a monument to human aspiration. Now the slaughterhouse, it's ugly. It's brutal. It smells like death. But it feeds the town. It employs people. It's the economic engine that makes survival possible. And eventually, you have to choose whether to save them or condemn them. Because the plague is spread through the earth, and the polyhedron is built on infected ground. The clock is ticking. So, save the beautiful, useless dream, or save the ugly, necessary machine? Or maybe be crazy enough to do both. Let's talk about the plague itself, because it's not just a plot device. It's a system, an elegant, horrifying system that simulates how quickly institutions collapse under exponential stress. The plague spreads through contact. NPCs have routines, they walk paths, they live in certain areas. The slaughterhouse workers congregate at the bar, the children play in the polyhedron, the herb brides perform rituals in the Gorgon. If you think about it, you can pretty much mind map the whole storyboard of the plague genesis. One infected person in the right location at the right time can trigger a cascade, and you can see it happening. You can watch the red zones expand on the map. You can calculate the R0 value, and you can't stop it. Not because the game doesn't give you tools. You have quarantine recommendations, you have decrees, you have infection data, but the people just don't care. They have jobs, they have traditions, they have committee meetings to attend. The plague isn't the villain. The plague is just doing what plagues do. The villain is the system that allows it to spread unchecked because no one can agree on a response. The real plague in Pathologic 3 isn't the disease, ironically. It's not the infection spreading through the streets. The real plague is bureaucratic inertia. It's ego. It's the inability of smart people to coordinate under pressure. It's the human tendency to value tradition over survival, comfort over truth. The plague you fight with medicine is just a catalyst. The plague you can't cure is structural, cultural, human. So here's the thing about Pathologic 3. The thing that makes it brilliant and infuriating in equal measure. The game isn't asking you to just save the town. It's asking you what saving means for you. Is it preserving the maximum number of lives? Then that's finding the cure. Is it preserving the best of what humanity could become? That's finding immortality. Beautiful, aspirational, lonely, sterile. And the game refuses to tell you which one is correct. Because there is no correct answer. There is just the answer you can live with, among 9 different endings you can get. The Bachelor, Dankovsky, believes that death is a solvable problem. That with enough intelligence, enough data, and enough ruthless application of the scientific method, we can engineer immortality. That's what you came here for, right? And then the game asks, even if you're right, should you? Because to solve death in this town, you have to become death. You have to make the calculations. Who lives, who dies, who matters, who's expendable. You have to treat people like variables in an equation. No more than that. And maybe you save the town. Maybe you preserve the research. Maybe you prove immortality is possible. Your lab is saved. But you've also proven that the cost of immortality is humanity. I went back through my case files on my second time rewind. The ones I'd been keeping since I arrived. Detailed notes, symptom logs, treatment outcomes, survival probabilities. Day 3. Patient presents with early stage infection. The prognosis is not favorable even with an immediate intervention. Recommended quarantine. Day 4. Subject X. Plague positive. Resource allocation marginal. Treatment deferred. Day 7. Asset classification redundant. ROI is close to negative. Ignore if there's no time. I didn't notice it happening. Somewhere between day 4 and day 7, people stopped being people in my notes. They became subjects, assets, ROI calculations. I started keeping the journal to practice good medicine, to document symptoms, track outcomes, and build a knowledge base. Standard professional practice, the kind of thing any competent doctor does. But by the end, it was a ledger. A spreadsheet of who lived and who died and why neither of those things mattered except as data points in my optimization algorithm. And I realized that's the point. The game isn't about the plague. It's about what you become when systems force you to choose between bad options. Every decision I made was defensible. Every choice was logical. I can justify every looted corpse, every abandoned NPC, every cold calculation. But justification and righteousness aren't the same thing, and Pathologic 3 knows that. It watched me become a monster with a calculator, and it never once told me I was wrong. It just showed me my own handwriting. This is what competence in a broken system requires. You become the system. You internalize its logic, you optimize for its metrics. And somewhere along the way, you forget that the metrics aren't the point. The system is supposed to serve people, not the other way around. You wanted to kill death, remember? Instead, you became its accountant. Pathologic 3 is a masterpiece of hostile design. It hates you, not in the Dark Souls hard way. It hates your desire for closure, it hates your need to be the hero, it hates the little voice in your head that says, I can fix this. It gives you all the information you need and withholds all the information you want. It respects your intelligence while punishing your hubris. It simulates the crushing weight of institutional failure. It shows you that sometimes having the right answer doesn't matter if the system is designed to reject it. The game is user hostile by design. Whether that's brilliant or sadistic depends on your tolerance for artistic suffering, which is actually the essence of the Pathologic series. So, let's talk about whether you should play this game. And I want to be very clear, Pathologic 3 is not fun. It's not fun the way Dark Souls is difficult but rewarding. It's not fun the way Papers, Please is challenging but meaningful. It's work. It's exhausting, unrewarding, and bureaucratic work. You will spend 20 minutes navigating dialogue trees to get permission to pick up an item. You will trade your heirloom watch for a sedative and then immediately need a stimulant. You will perfectly diagnose a patient and watch them die anyway because the systems of care have collapsed. If you want power fantasy, go play Doom. If you want to relax, play Stardew Valley. If you want to feel like a competent hero who saves the day, there are 10,000 games that will give you that dopamine hit. Pathologic 3 will make you feel like the only sober person in a burning building, and everyone else is currently arguing about whether the fire is real. But if you've ever worked in healthcare, in public service, in any system where you had the expertise to fix the problem but not the authority, if you've ever been the competent person in an incompetent organization, if you've ever wondered what it feels like when your best isn't good enough because the systems won't let it be, then this game will wreck you in the best and worst possible ways. Pathologic 3 is not a game about plague. It's a game about systems. About what happens when competent people are trapped in an incompetent systems. About the compromises required to succeed when success itself is morally compromised. It's a game that asks, if you had to become a monster to save a people, would you? Should you? And it doesn't give you an answer, just gives you a mirror. Lots of them. I think this is the most important game I've played this decade, and I will never play it again. Oh, and just don't expect a thank you card from the patients. They prefer the plague. Much more authentic to their heritage.